The boy didn't flinch when the rifle cocked. He just sat there in the tall grass, arms around his knees, tears dry on his cheeks. The wind combed gently through his long, tangled hair. His boots were missing. So were the soles of his feet, torn raw by miles of prairie, grit, and heat. Blood had dried in black streaks down his ankles. Marshal Rudd lowered his rifle and whispered low to the man beside him. "You see any sign of who left him?" Boone Carver shook his head. His own hat was tilted low, shadowing his square jaw and tired eyes. "Ain't nobody out here for miles. Marshal, kid's alone." The boy turned then, not startled, not afraid, just searching. His lips cracked apart, and he rasped one sentence, like he'd been holding it for days. "I'm waitin' for him. He gonna come back, he always does." Boone stepped forward slowly, careful like with a wild animal. "Who, son?" The boy looked past them, his voice trembled with something like hope. "My horse." The sun pulsed behind the boy like a furnace. That hill stretched high and empty, waving with gold grass. No horse, no rider. Just that boy, 10, maybe 11, with eyes too old for his face, sitting in the sun like it was the edge of the world. But let's go back to where it all started. Boone Carver didn't talk much anymore, not since the war. Not since what happened out at Broken Elm Creek. Folks in town said he was a quiet rancher with too many scars and too few words. He said little, worked hard, kept his land alive, and didn't ask for help. The kind of man who fixed his own fence after a hailstorm and buried his own dog with his bare hands. His ranch sat west of Dry Post, a town that only got lively when the train passed through, and even then, only at the saloon. Boone lived up in the bluffs, where the wind was cleaner and the soil thin but stubborn. Like him, that morning, he was riding the fence line when he saw the vultures. Not circling, sitting. 5 of them, black and quiet, perched like judges across a dead tree. That's how Boone knew it wasn't cattle. Cows die in the sun and get torn up quick. But vultures waiting like that meant something else. Something still warm. He tied off his gelding and climbed the ridge. That's where he found the tracks, one set, small, dragging. Blood in the grass. A child's footprints, barefoot, cutting a straight line toward the far hill like he didn't know or care what waited there. Boone followed Dot. By the time he reached the boy, the kid had gone still, not passed out, just still, like something inside him had run out of steam and was waiting to be refilled. Boone had seen boys like that before, after raids, after battle, after they'd seen too much for too long. But this one wasn't broken, not yet, just dry and waiting. "Hey," Boone said, crouching, "you all right, son?" The boy didn't move. Boone looked him over. Skin blistered from sun, tongue like leather, ribs showing, but the eyes sharp, alert. Watching the horizon. "I got water," Boone said, and didn't wait. He took the canteen from his saddle, unhooked it, and held it out. The boy reached slowly, like it was a trick. Then he drank. Quietly, carefully. Never lowering his eyes from the hill. "You got a name?" Boone asked. The boy nodded. "Jed, you hurt, Jed?" "No, sir, where's your folks?" The boy blinked. "Don't got none." Boone frowned. "Where you from?" The boy licked his lips. "Nowhere. I just ride." Boone paused. "You said you was waiting for someone who—" Jed turned, finally meeting his eyes. "He raised me," he said. "Taught me how to sleep standing up. How to smell a storm coming. Said the earth talks, if you're quiet enough. Said men lie, but horses don't." Boone looked down the hill, nothing but miles of heat and prairie. "Who was he, Jed?" The boy stared out again. "A stallion," he whispered. "Black as coal. Born under lightning. I was just a baby when he found me in the floodplain. I remember his breath warm, like home." Boone didn't speak. He just stood there, the wind tugging his coat, the silence stretching. Most would have thought the boy touched in the head. Drought and grief and hunger will do that. But Boone didn't move. Because something in the boy's eyes didn't feel like fantasy, it felt like faith. A noise behind them made Boone turn. Marshal Rudd, rifle ready, "You're all right." The marshal called. Boone raised a hand. "He ain't dangerous. Danger's not what I'm worried about." The marshal squinted. "Kid look familiar." Boone looked again. Jed sat like he belonged to the land, too still, too old, too tired, and behind those eyes, something haunted. Boone shook his head. "No, but he don't need a jail cell. He needs food and a bath." The marshal grunted. "He also needs someone to explain how the hell he survived out here alone." Jed didn't argue. He just looked past them both, toward the setting sun, where the air shimmered and the sky blazed. "He'll come," he said softly. "I know he will." Boone glanced again at the empty horizon. Nothing moved. He knelt one last time beside the boy. "All right," he said. "Let's wait then. But we'll do it from my place. I got oats for horses and a roof for boys." The boy didn't answer, but his shoulders eased just a little. Boone lifted him gently, and Jed leaned into him without a word. Far off, a hawk cried once, circling overhead. And the grass swayed like it was listening. To ask ChatGPT, the boy didn't speak much during the ride. He sat behind Boone, arms tight around his waist, eyes never leaving the horizon. Every time the wind shifted, Jed would tilt his head like he was listening to something Boone couldn't hear. By the time they reached the ranch, dusk had bled into the earth and soaked the sky in rust and purple. Boone's cabin sat like a scar in the landscape, not pretty, not large, but sturdy. It had survived 3 summers of locusts, a cattle fire, and the winter the river froze solid. Boone dismounted and helped the boy down slow. "Inside," he said, opening the door. "Ain't much, but it's dry and warm." Jed stepped in and blinked at the lamplight. His shoulders were too small for the coat Boone had thrown around him. He hovered near the door like a colt unsure of its pen. Boone poured a tin cup of stew and pushed it toward him. Jed didn't hesitate this time. He ate like it was sacred. Boone sat nearby, watching the fire snap and pop. The wind scratched at the windows like old bones. After a long silence, the boy finally spoke. "Don't think I'm lying." Boone didn't look up. "Didn't say you were. Everybody thinks I am," Jed muttered. "Marshall too, but I ain't." Boone leaned back. "Don't matter what folks think. You know your truth. That's more than most men got." Jed paused. "You believe me?" Boone considered. "Then, I believe you believe." That was enough. The boy nodded once, slow, and returned to his stew. But in town, things weren't quiet. Word spread fast in Dry Post. A boy found alone on the ridge. No shoes, no past. Rambling about horses, raising him like kin. Folks gathered in groups at the saloon and mercantile, whispering, watching the trail up to Boone's ranch, like something dangerous had just crept into the hills. Boone saw it himself. 2 days later, when he rode in for supplies, Eliza Crane, the baker's wife, stepped away from the flour sacks and folded her arms. "You, the one brought in that feral child." Boone nodded. "They say he's Apache half-wild. That he bit Marshall Rudd when he tried to lift him." Boone didn't flinch. "He's hungry and quiet. Ain't bit no one." Eliza sniffed. "Might be a trick. Boys like that been used before. Scouts, lookouts. You remember what happened at Hanging Creek?" Boone met her gaze. "I remember what happened after Hanging Creek, when folks started seeing ghosts in every shadow." Eliza's eyes narrowed. "You watch yourself, Mr. Carver. People around. Here, don't forget things easy." Back outside, Boone packed the dry goods and turned to find the preacher leaning against the hitch rail. Reverend Hartley wasn't cruel, but his face had the worn, sun-cracked sharpness of someone who'd buried too many children and tried too hard to explain why. He watched Boone with a calm weight. "You think you're helping that boy," the Reverend said. "But trouble follows strays. Always has." Boone met his gaze. "I ain't asking you to take him in," Reverend Hartley sighed. "No, you're just asking the town to look the other way if something goes wrong." Boone didn't reply. He mounted his horse and rode off, dust trailing like a tail behind him. Back at the ranch, Jed was sitting outside in the dirt, carving something into a piece of soft bark with a nail he'd found in the shed. Boone dismounted and crouched beside him. "What you makin'?" Jed held it up. It was rough, but clear, a horse, all legs and mane, wild and rearing. "That him?" Boone asked. Jed nodded. His name's Smoke, 'cause he looked like it, moving through the canyon. Like a shadow with fire behind it. Boone didn't know what to say. He'd known men who talked to ghosts, soldiers who heard their dead, suns in the trees. But this felt different. Not madness, not grief, just belief. The kind that makes mountains feel small. That night, a knock came at the door. Boone opened it, slow, and found two ranchers from the valley, Clem and Barker, both armed and angry. "You got that boy in there still?" Clem asked. Boone didn't answer. Barker stepped forward. "We found cattle dead. Ripped open like wolves got at 'em, but no tracks. No wolves either, just this." He held up a hunk of black mane. "Coarse, thick. Matches what the kid's been talking about." Boone frowned. "That's horsehair." "Exactly," Barker hissed. "You let a witch boy into your home, Boone, and now there's signs and omens and dead animals." Boone stepped out onto the porch. "You believe that horse did it?" Clem spat. "I believe that boy's cursed, or possessed, or worse." Boone crossed his arms. "He's a boy, not a war drum. You want to blame something? Look to the drought, the coyotes, or yourselves. You'd risk all our safety for a kid, ain't even yours." Boone's voice dropped, low and slow. "I ain't risking anything. I'm giving a starving boy a roof. That used to mean something around here." Clem's hand twitched near his pistol, but Boone didn't move. Just stared until the men turned and mounted up. They rode off into the night, muttering. Boone turned back to find Jed standing in the doorway. He'd heard all of it, but his face was calm. "They're scared," the boy said. Boone nodded. "Yeah, fear makes folks mean." Jed held up his carving again. "He's out there. I can feel him." Boone looked past the boy, out into the black night. Somewhere, a lone coyote howled, and the wind shifted, carrying the faintest scent of distant sagebrush and dust, and maybe, just maybe, the thunder of unseen hooves. The drums started 2 nights later, not loud, not even close, just a low thump, carried by wind, rolling off the hills like a heartbeat buried in earth. Boone stood on the porch when he first heard it. Pipe forgotten, fire in the hearth behind him glowing dull. Jed came out and stopped beside him, barefoot, still as the trees. "That's not trouble," the boy whispered. "That's memory." Boone didn't answer. He just listened, jaw locked tight, eyes scanning the dark dot by morning. Someone had painted a red hand on his barn. It wasn't blood, but it was close, thick, crude, slapped across the boards like a warning, the kind Boone had seen once before, back during the Apache raids of '68. Then it meant, your land is watched. And this time, it was left for him to read and reckon with. He scraped it off, silent. Later that afternoon, Marshal Rudd rode up, hat low, face unreadable. "Got something you need to hear," he said. Boone nodded, followed him inside. Jed stayed on the porch, carving in the dust with a stick. His expression calm but distant. Inside, the marshal poured a small shot of rye and leaned on the table. "You ever heard of the ghost stallion?" Boone raised an eyebrow. "No, well," Rudd said, "some of the Comanche tribes south of the Red River still talk about him. A wild beast, born in a thunderstorm, black as pitch, smarter than a man. They say he freed himself from soldiers once, broke his own leg bone to escape, then healed wrong, but kept running. The old ones believe he carries spirits across the land. That he chooses who sees him." Boone frowned. "You believe that?" Rudd shrugged. "Doesn't matter what I believe. What matters is they do. And a boy shows up here, talking about that very horse like it raised him." He leaned closer. "You're not just harboring a child, Boone. You're holding a symbol, a walking myth. And myths don't sit quiet when stirred." Boone said nothing. The marshal stood and finished his drink. "Word is spreading," Rudd continued. "You're being watched, not just by locals, There's a scout from the northern band been spotted. Came through town last night. Just stood there, didn't speak. But folks are nervous. Boone opened the door without a word. Jed was still on the porch, tracing circles into the dirt. That evening, Boone rode to the bluff, same one where he'd found Jed. He scanned the distance, and he saw it, just barely. A lone rider, too far to see clearly. No movement, no sound. Just a figure, motionless at the horizon line, like a ghost carved from stone. Boone didn't wave, didn't approach. He just sat on his horse, and watched. The next day, it got worse. Someone set fire to Boone's chicken coop. Nothing survived but ash and feathers. No one saw who did it, but everyone knew why. The town was turning, not with rage, but with fear. Fear that Boone had invited something older than law or scripture. Fear that the boy wasn't alone anymore, that the horse, if real, was a harbinger of change. That night, Boone set out lanterns all around the cabin, not to ward anyone off, but so they could see he wasn't hiding. Jed sat on the front steps. Hands in his lap, he's close, the boy said again, calm as rain. Boone sat beside him. What happens if he comes? Jed blinked. He chooses, and he shows the truth. Boone lit a match. Let it burn to his fingers. Truth don't always bring peace, kid. Jed looked up at him. It does if it's been waiting long enough. Boone didn't sleep that night. He heard the hooves around midnight. Not galloping, not wild, just walking, deliberate, heavy, circling the house once, slow, then silence. He grabbed his rifle and opened the front door. Nothing, just lanterns swaying gently in the wind. But the boy was gone. Boone's heart slammed once in his chest, hard enough to break him. He ran out barefoot, rifle in one hand, voice low and sharp. Jed. Silence. Then, from the ridge movement, the boy, standing perfectly still, and something else behind him. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a trick of moonlight. The horse was real, black as wet coal, eyes lit like amber lanterns, muscles rippling. With each breath, it stood behind Jed like a monument, silent, still, untouched by saddle or bridle. Boone couldn't breathe. Jed turned and looked down at him. He came, he said. The stallion lowered its head and nudged the boy gently. Then it looked straight at Boone, and Boone felt it. Not fear, not awe, but memory, deep, buried, ancient. Something primal stirred. Like watching a fire burn in reverse. He lowered the rifle. Jed said nothing more. Just stroked the stallion's neck with the calm of someone touching their own heart. Behind Boone, a torch flared, someone approaching. Fast he turned, and saw townsfolk, maybe a dozen, coming over the hill, shouting, guns raised. Clem's voice rang out. Step away from that boy, Boone. Boone raised both hands. He's not alone, and he's not yours to claim. Move. The horse reared, not in fear, but warning. Firelight caught in its eyes like stars. The townspeople halted. No one fired. No one spoke, because suddenly, it wasn't a boy and a horse. It was something older, something watching them, and for the first time, Boone felt the truth too. They weren't the ones in charge out here. The land was . No one spoke. The hilltop glowed in torchlight and moonlight both, shadows thrown long across the grass. The black stallion stood like a statue, head held high, wind moving through its mane like it moved through the trees. Jed stayed at its flank, one hand resting against its shoulder like he'd grown there. The torchbearers lowered their guns first, not out of trust, but confusion. Boone stepped forward, slow. You all came out here thinking the boy brought trouble, he said, voice carrying over the grass. But I think what's really bothering you is that the world still holds things you don't understand. Clem didn't reply. Barker shifted behind him. Boone kept going. You saw a barefoot boy crying on a hill, token about a horse. Raising him, thought maybe he was touched, or worse. But what if he's just telling the truth? What if the land's still speaking, and you're just too loud to hear it? That's superstition, Eliza Crane called from behind. The torchline, a story. He's a boy, Boone. Not a prophet. Here's a boy, Boone agreed. That much is true, but the only thing he's asked for is to wait. Wait for the one thing that ever showed him kindness. Boone turned toward Jed now, slowly. You told me once he raised you, that he found you in a floodplain. Jed nodded. He did. I remember the water, I remember the cold, and then I remember warmth. Not a man, not a house, just him, big as a tree and quiet as sleep. He laid beside me until the storm stopped. Boone's voice gentled. Jed, you know what people are gonna say? That you're lost, that you're lying, that you're touched in the head, maybe even cursed. Jed blinked, slow. They said the same about my ma, before she drowned. Boone stiffened.